coming up with a lot of new ideas, a decade or so after originally working on the Perl 5 side of the family tree. And so he started working on a new language. And as we all know, Perl 6, which we now call Raku, is not Perl, it's Raku. It's a new language. It's not, because Perl is the same thing as Perl 1 through 5, and Perl 6 is the same thing as Raku. These are not the same languages. They certainly interact in many ways. They both came from the same progenitor, and they can be made to work together in many different ways to varying degrees, but they are not the same languages. And Perl 6 is not a new version of Perl 5, which is why we're changing the name to Raku so that it's not confusing, because this is another situation where something that seems to be a version number is not. It should not have been a number. It should have been an addition or a name just named as a new language. So it confused a lot of people and caused a lot of marketing problems for Perl, unfortunately. We're recovering from that now, fortunately, but it was a long problem that will take a long recovery. But it's half of our family tree. So you can't just, delete half your family. We have to love them and care for them and include them in our community. And Perl 5 and Perl 6, or as we call them, Perl and Raku, are sibling languages, which is why they both are on the same level as we'll see in the final family tree. So this language, the specification is the test suite. So, and the test suite is written in the language. Wrap your brains around that, even if you're not a programmer. You have to pass the tests to prove that you've implemented Perl 6, but the tests are written in Perl 6. And this is what you call the chicken and the egg. So there's a lot of ways around that. You have to create sub-languages and partial implementations and virtual machines and so forth, which we'll talk about. Now, one of which, parrot. We talked about the parrot a few minutes ago. Pony and parrot. Pony and parrot, two animal mascots. We love our mascots in Perl. Parrot from the Dead Parrot sketch, Monty Python. Any Monty Python fans? Yes, of course, you all are. You don't have to raise your hand, okay? If you're here at the Perl conference, you have to be a Monty Python fan. And of course, the Python language, copying the P from Perl and getting its name from Monty Python so that we can continue the LAMP acronym, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and Perl, but they wanted to have a Python and maybe a PHP and so forth that are all P languages. Well, P is also for parrot. And Monty Python is also for parrot. And parrot is a virtual machine that was originally created to be used for Perl 6 and Perl 5. It was really focused on Perl 6, but it was proposed early on and accepted that it could also be used for Perl 5, and that was where Pony came from, because Pony was going to re-implement Perl 5 and emit the opcodes or individual commands to run on the parrot virtual machine. Perl 6, the language early on, was also supposed to be implemented in one way or another to implement opcodes to run on this same parrot virtual machine. Unfortunately, Perl 6 evolved in its own way and evolved away from the Parrot project. Pony, as we had mentioned, was put out to pasture and went to the great green pastures in the sky. And so Parrot was left to a very odd fate, which I guess is perhaps our naturally occurring and tragically comic real-life version of the Dead Parrot sketch, because Parrot is now dead, that several other experimental languages, like college students implementing their language for their grad school or, this or that, somebody that just wanted to play around, there's a whole laundry list of languages none of us have never heard of or care about and never will that use parrot. So it became this sort of bizarre catch-all virtual machine that a lot of other groups decided to use, but it never came to ultimate fruition for either Perl 5 or Perl 6. But it still goes on the Perl 6 side because it was begat by, to use the biblical terminology, by the Perl 6 project. So the Perl 6 side of the family tree is where parrot originally came from, and pony got tacked onto that from the Perl 5 side. Pugs. Pugs was an implementation of Perl 6 in Haskell, or Haskell, depending on who you ask or how you pronounce it. Audrey Tang, Audrey Tang, also depending on who you ask or how you pronounce it. Mr. or Miss Tang had implemented their own version of Pugs that lasted quite some time, their own version of Perl 6 called Pugs, and this was used as a reference implementation. So a lot of the other work, as far as I understand it, on Perl 6 was influenced by or inspired by Pugs, and it was probably one of the more mature versions. As we know, all dogs go to heaven, and Pugs has also gone on to chase police cars and enjoy the fire hydrants up in heaven. But I think a lot of the ideas and inspiration also carry on. Viv and Standard, yet another deceased attempted partial, somewhat pseudo implementation of Perl 6. Viv stands for 6-5, VIV, 6-5. So this was an attempt to compile Perl 5 code into Perl 6 code or something along those lines, a little bit confusing. And Standard was the standard grammar written by St. Larry, never got finished or utilized, I guess, but this is actually Perl 5 grammar written in Perl 6. So Perl 6, one of its features is that it allows you to write grammars directly in the language. So you can implement any other language using Perl 6, which is one of the super crazy high magic futuristic expialidocious features of Perl 6, and why I do believe that Perl 6 and Perl will ultimately take back over the entire world again is because you can implement any other language in Perl. Because of this whole making grammars the first-class citizens of the language. So Larry had written most of a Perl 5 grammar in Perl 6, not all of it. I think there were some edge cases, again, that even he did not want to deal with. And also this would be something that, as far as I understand, that would parse Perl 5, but then we would still have to implement the semantic actions to run it. So it's again a partial implementation that never completely got off the ground and has since been retired. Niexa, or however you pronounce it, can't figure that out. This is still a live project. Doesn't have a logo. I had to make one up. Couldn't figure out what language that was supposed to be, so I just picked some Central American god. Niexa is another Microsoft project, or Microsoft platform targeting project, not funded by Microsoft as far as I know, but this is Perl 6 in .NET, or at least the Common Language Runtime portion of the .NET framework. I'm not a Windows guy, but as far as I understand it, this is essentially Perl 6 in Windows. So if you want to do Perl 5 in Windows, you do your Strawberry or Active Perl. You want to do Perl 6 in Windows, you probably do this. Rakudo. This is the current implementation of Perl 6, the current primary reference implementation of Perl 6. And It's several components combined together. Notice the name Raku matches Rakudo. Raku means easy. Rakudo supposedly means the way of the camel. NQP, a related project, is not quite Perl. This is a subset of Perl 6 that can be used to implement the greater part of Perl 6. And more VM is the underlying virtual machine that NQP compiles to. And again, this is from, I'm not an architect of this project. I built the Perl 5 compiler, not the Perl 6 compiler. But that's my best understanding of it, and there are others that know more. This is the main Perl 6 right now. So let's skip forward a minute. Let's forget the old, out with the old, in with the new. Because there's a bit of it here, okay? Where are we headed? Where are we going? I just showed you where we've been. I just showed you the family tree, okay? And we'll circle back to the whole tree here in a minute. But we're heading towards a destination. Perl 11 is not yet a Perl version. The idea is that eventually you will have Perl 5 and Perl 6 reunified. We call this reunification. Perl 6 has three primary ideals or goals. Again, the reunification of Perl 5 and 6, the runtime speed equal or greater than C, and modularity of the Perl implementations. So, you know, we're pursuing each of these goals differently. You know, our Perl is really based off of sort of this modularity and speed. There was like the P2 that's based more on reunification and so forth, but they all have something in common, which is all of these projects are still active, and all of these projects are futuristically oriented editions of Perl. And the pumpkin isn't on there, sorry Sawyer. But he didn't show up for this talk anyway, so he can't get mad. But C-Perl is, and you know C-Perl is a fork of the pumpkin, as we discussed. And hopefully they'll get remerged because we will need that pumpkin code. Okay, we can't get rid of it. We're gonna have to have to fall back on just in case. But all of these projects will somehow continue to evolve together. Will somehow continue to interact with one another and perhaps even be merged. I had mentioned Perlito and WebPerl have a lot in common. They're both sort of running inside your browser. RPerl also has a cloud platform, Cloud for Free, that we are planning to utilize Perlito and WebPerl in that as well. So you may see, you're going to, I mean, they're all pointing in the same direction. You're going to see a lot of these things combining in some way in the future. How they will combine, I don't know. That's really what remains to be seen. But it's very exciting. And I can tell you that working on one of them, for me, RPerl primarily, has been the most exciting technical thing I've ever done, even though it's also the